Will you mark further on the bill? Representative Sampson of the 80th. Good afternoon, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. I thank the good chairman of the Insurance Committee for his introduction on the bill. And I have some more or less technical questions about the language that's contained therein, and then I'd like to talk a little bit more about the philosophy behind it. But I want to start by saying that I'm certain that every member of this chamber is concerned about the health of our citizens, and certainly the health of our women citizens as well. There's just an underlying philosophy about whether or not we should be telling citizens and businesses, in this case insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, and so forth, what type of coverages they ought to be providing, or whether we should be leaving the choice to those businesses and the consumers to help develop products that have the items that they think are important to them. We know that we have a serious problem in this country and absolutely in our state about the cost of health care and the cost of health care insurance. And one of the main drivers of those costs are the actions of this legislature. We are one of the states that has the most insurance mandates in the entire country. An insurance mandate essentially is a law that requires an insurance company to provide certain coverages. So they do not have a choice. There are certain people who might not want to purchase those coverages because of the cost, but when we tell the insurance company they must provide it, that means every consumer must also pay. And of course, every insurance mandate that ever comes before us is a good thing because it's providing some additional health insurance benefit for the person with the policy. The problem is that each one of them also costs money and drives up the cost of premiums. And when we drive up the cost of premiums, there's only a few things that can happen. Either one, people cannot afford to buy insurance and they go without, which defeats the entire purpose of providing the coverage and its access to begin with, or the other taxpayers, the other ratepayers have to subsidize that additional cost of insurance. So this is a battle we have every year in this legislature when bills come before the Insurance Committee and this chamber to decide what things are important, what things we must mandate to make sure that insurance companies are providing adequate coverage, and what things should be left up to consumers and companies to decide on their own. When Obamacare came along, essentially it took a great deal of that choice away from the individual states and said that many, many, many things have to be covered. In some cases, we had more coverage in our state than what Obamacare would require, and in some cases we had less. But the ultimate result was that coverage became much, much more expensive. I'm going to go talk about the substance of the bill briefly, but I want to come back to this philosophy because it's important. I almost got ahead of myself by talking about the tremendous rate increases that have occurred just in the last year, I think 35% in some cases for the cost of various health insurance premiums. That is an unsustainable thing, and I think that's why you saw citizens across our country very much in favor of repealing the mandates that occur under the Obamacare policy. So, Mr. Speaker, a couple of questions for the opponent through you. In Section 1 of the bill, I'm hoping the good chairman of the Insurance Committee can tell me what the significance of the word shall is.
Representative Scanlon.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, which line are you referring to? Or which line is the gentleman referring to? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sampson.
Mr. Speaker, that is line 5.
Representative Scanlon.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, the shall in this case requires that the insurance policy in this specific section on the individual health insurance policy shall provide coverage, meaning that they will pay for coverage for those enumerated services throughout Section 1. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I bring that up just to point out that this is the very definition of an insurance mandate. When we tell an insurance company that they shall provide coverage, not that they may provide coverage, not that that can be in the product offerings, but that they have to provide this coverage and therefore charge for the premium. There are a number of shalls throughout this bill. I just pulled that one out as the first instance. The next several lines talk about the exact types of coverage that shall be mandated to be provided by the insurance companies. And again, all of us would agree that these are good things that people should have. Domestic and interpersonal violence screening and counseling, tobacco use intervention, well women visits, breast cancer chemo prevention counseling, breast cancer risk assessment, chlamydia infection screening, cervical and vaginal cancer screening, gonorrhea screening, human immunodeficiency virus screening, human or HPV virus screening, sexually transmitted infections counseling for sexually active women, anemia screening, folic acid supplements for pregnant women and women that might become pregnant, Hep B screenings, syphilis screenings, urinary tract screenings, breastfeeding support and counseling, breastfeeding supplies, screening for certain types of diabetes, osteoporosis screening. That is a pretty long list of mandates, all good things that I would hope that people have access to in our society to purchase coverage for protection against. There are some that would try and make this argument about access, but it's not about access because everyone has access. These coverages are available to be purchased everywhere. The question is whether or not they are mandated to be provided and that people, whether they want to or not, must pay for them to exist. In Section 3, and several other sections actually, there are references to deductibles. Through you, Mr. Speaker, are there any deductibles for the coverage that I just listed? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Scanlon.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, it depends on the item, but the beauty of the list of things that you just enumerated when it comes to preventative care is that it's not a new mandate because it's already covered under the Affordable Care Act. And all we're doing by talking about this bill here today is ensuring that whatever the fate of the ACA is in Washington won't matter to Connecticut women because they will know that the rights that they currently have and the preventative care that they're currently getting is going to continue being offered to them at no cost, in most cases here, at the preventative level, should the ACA be repealed. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the chairman for that answer. So, I don't know of any item on here that actually has a deductible. I believe they are all zero deductible, which clearly is beneficial to folks that are on a limited income or are on a fully subsidized plan so that there is absolutely no out-of-pocket expense for them. And I can understand there are people in our society that we definitely need to take care of, and that may be a very, very good thing. But there are plenty of people that are more than happy to take a few bucks out of their pocket to voluntarily pay for their contraception and things like that that might help drive down the cost of insurance. And with this bill, we are unfortunately taking away the choice and the freedom of consumers and insurance companies to come to terms on what products they want to buy. I noticed throughout this bill that it says screening, coverage, etc. for women, which I have no objection to. But my concern is why we are taking such lengths and efforts to provide coverages, and we are specifically saying for women and not for all people. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sampson, will you yield to the majority leader?
Sure.
Representative Ritter.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we pass this item temporarily. Thank you.
Without objection, the bill will be passed temporarily.